Then use a spark plug socket or 5/8. Put it down into the upper intake, and you'll be able to see these grooves. See those grooves? You'll just twist it. You'll have to put a lot of pressure on it. Alright, put this gasket in place on the upper intake manifold. And then take these bolts that come with it. I have to use one of my originals on the top because it's got a nut on it. And then put that gasket on. I'm assuming that's a 9/32, but I don't have a socket. I don't have a wrench to figure it out in case you need to move it. Throttle body nuts are 10mm. I recommend putting the throttle body on first onto the upper intake manifold before you put the upper intake manifold on first, because this bar is completely in the way for that bolt. Alright, same as the last car I did. Same issue I'm having with the last car. This bar, where is it in the camera? Ah, okay. This bar right here is holding up that end. Technically, when you tighten it down with the specs, 89 inch-pounds, that should take care of any tilt. But the last one I did, I completely cracked one housing and sent it back. And then the one I got back, or the new one I got, was in better condition. But I still cracked these two bolts holes. So just be really careful. Replace the throttle body bolts. The lighter colored one goes up front toward the nose of the engine, or toward the nose of the car. When you're counting up your bolts to clean them out, make sure and remember that this is one of them. Wherever you put that, hopefully you put it with the rest of them, like I didn't. Alright, we're up to putting thread lock on the upper intake manifold bolts. You're going to need your 10mm socket and your 5/16 socket. One last look before we put any torque down on the bolts for that nut position or bolt position. You can see, I don't know if this camera can actually pick it up, the bolt hole is a bit high. Upper intake manifold bolt order at 89 inch-pounds. Put a rivet washer or something under the 9th and 10th bolt. Trust me. Worry about the torque wrench until you get them snugged down. Then you can worry about the torque wrench and get going on that before the Loctite dries up. Slow and steady. Don't want to crank them hard, just crank them slow. It's 10 pound increments max. Out of the three that I've done, this is the one that has cracked the least. This camera won't focus well enough for you to really see this crack very well. It's about 1/8 of an inch long. And that didn't happen until I got up into the upper 80 inch-pounds. So that happened a lot later than the other two did. I don't know if this camera can pick it up, but that cracking only happens when the head of the bolt starts going into the plastic, going into or under it, beside it, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't stay on top of it anymore, like those. This one in particular digs in. These directions actually come with the upper intake manifold. It tells you what the torque is and you know, which number to do first, second, third, blah blah blah. Alright, so if you get a manifold that has an oblong bolt hole in it, this is actually the second manifold that I purchased because the first one I bought, I'll show you here, this hole here was oblong and it couldn't handle the torque that the directions specified. I would recommend getting like a rivet washer or something to fit the hole and the bolt itself, because what happened to me was I was doing this increment stuff like it shows you to do, and I got up to 22, I got up to 44, and I got up to like 56 or 57, and that bolt hole cracked right down the whole body of the piece of plastic. And it's because the hole was not round, so only pieces of it was getting the torque on it, you know. The throttle body bolt hole is actually in line now that everything's torqued down. Right now I'm replacing the air intake body. Place this plate behind the throttle body. It's 10 millimeter bolt. You could use a little thread lock if you want. Next is this brake vacuum hose. Next is the alternator support, and the engine belt. If you numbered these correctly, you're going backwards. You got a 10 millimeter bolt here and a 15 millimeter nut here. If you numbered them correctly, you won't get them all confused in which way it moves, which way it goes, etc. Make sure and look at the belt, inspect the belt, and make sure that there's no cracks. If you've got more than 6 or 8 cracks per inch, replace the belt. I see 0 cracks on this whole belt. The hardest part is getting it wrapped around everything and then getting the wrench in under the belt and onto that bolt. That's the hardest part. Then make sure everything is lined up straight, because if it's off an 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch, it'll make a chirp noise because it's causing too much stress. Remember to watch for your belt pattern sticker, and when you want to move the belt tensioner 15 millimeter and you push toward the cab of the car to loosen it up. Alright, should be looking pretty good. We can put the overflow back on. And this is pretty much impossible to see when it's in the car, so I just took a marker and drew over the formed letters. And this is 2 10 millimeter nuts. Here's my number. Also may have this piece that it'll slide into under that little cup there. Hook up the radiator overflow tube. I had to wedge a Phillips head in there and twist it sideways in order to loosen that up enough to get the tube on. Now that the belt's on, you can put this piece back for the wire support. I don't know if this camera can see it, but this piece is a little bit too big back here, and actually dragging on the new plastic. If I wanted to, I could have ground it down a little bit, but instead I just put some thread lock on the nut. Next was this wire here onto this. Next is the fuel rail. Make sure and put this group of lines and this group of wires into this space. And if you're going to replace any of the fuel injectors, you need to replace all of them, because otherwise one cylinder is going to run different than the rest, and that's not going to be good for the engine whatsoever. Remember, there's 4 10mm nuts, 2 on each side of the engine, and press them in the direction of the injector holes. And don't go hog wild, just go as far as the base here. Once it touches the base, stop pushing. All I had to do it. Utility knife. Wedge in a flathead, smallest flathead screwdriver you got. And then the new one you can just roll right on. But make sure they're clean first. If you have any gasoline, like for your lawnmower or something, put some gasoline on these. That way they will seal right up when they hit the intake manifold. Well, that was about 105% easier said than done, but they're all on. Make sure and not put this wire harness in, lock in down here, otherwise you're not going to be able to get the fuel rail in under it. And we got a gas leak. Yay. That reeks. Alright. I forgot the camera was even running. I'm talking to myself. Give them a good pop like that, and they'll pop right in, and put the 10mm nuts on, and that's as tight as they need to get. If you were overzealous with your tubes and wiring down there and you can't get that nut in front of the driver, you can either start it with the end of a magnet or one of these claw things. Now put all these lines, electrical and gas lines, into this spot and hook up these I don't know the proper name for them. These things that hold the connectors, whatever. Reconnect the series of vacuum lines and electrical lines. Make sure and do them in reverse order completely. That way this doesn't all seem to be random crap. You're just layering backwards from the way you took it off. Also, make sure that they're all clean on the inside. You didn't get any dirt into the fuel injector wiring or anything like that. Put these blue clips back into place on the fuel injector wires, otherwise they won't go back into the injector. You'll have to take this support back off again, 13mm and 15mm, to get the spark plug wires under it. Alright. Press your wiring casing down into place. Clip this and then put this back in on top of the vibration damper here, 10mm. Okay, your canister goes back onto that clip. Here, hopefully you marked all the vacuum lines and electrical line. This tube vacuum line is intermingled into all of that stuff. And this is what that sticker is talking about right here. Is this tube. The new air filter and put the rest of the air system back together. Don't forget the wire to the air intake. Alright, hook this wire back up to this drive frame, or frame support, and it's 1/2 inch. Next is the rest of the vibration damper on the passenger side. If it doesn't want to line up, grab a hold of the alternator with one hand while you're shoving in the bolt, pushing on the bolt in that direction, and then just give the alternator a good jerk and it'll go in. Passenger side frame support, 1/2 inch bolts. Cross frame support with a deep well 1/2 inch socket. The battery with 5/16 wrench. Add antifreeze. Add antifreeze to the overflow tank. Make sure that you overfill it and let it run for roughly 45 minutes. If you were a victim of Hydralock, it's going to blow white smoke, really nasty clouds of white smoke for about 1/2 an hour. Turn the heater on full blast with the fan on as hot as it'll get. That will circulate the antifreeze into the heating system, and then spend the next couple days adding antifreeze. You shouldn't take more than 1 or 2 20-mile trips to be as full as it'll get. If you use 50/50 premix, you shouldn't have to worry about using one of these testers. Remember to check the oil after you've been running it for a while. Go through your list to make sure you didn't miss anything. Put the cab back on and start her up. Make sure and watch for leaks down with the new elbows and the perimeter of the lower and upper intake manifold, the fuel lines, pretty much everything. If you hear a squeal, then the belt's probably just a bit off. You might have a little smoke from the new gasket leaking just a little bit, but that should dissipate. And lastly, when you're all done, you don't need to get any of that fancy automotive soap crap. Just get Dawn and a scrub brush, that's all you need.